In the year of 1999, Namco Home Tech hit the scene with its first true attempt at a 3D platformer, starring its very own round yellow arcade mascot. And seeing how other franchises successfully made their transition into this new genre meant that the company wanted to try something different for the character's 20th anniversary. Many had speculated on how such a game could even work in the style, or if it would even sell well enough. There have even been old prototypes of the game that were met with furious disappointment from higher-ups in the company and were subsequently canned as a result. But, despite all of that, the final product released to a decent reception, and after playing through this title for myself over the last few years, I can safely say that they pulled it off rather well. So well, in fact, that it sold 1.25 million copies, spawned 2 other sequels, a racing spin-off, and an HD remake as of recently. So if you've played literally any of the early 3D platformer with the hub worlds, collectibles, backtracking, and such, then you will be very familiar with this game's formula. Pac-Man World opens with all of his friends and family gathering to set up a surprise party for his 20th birthday, hence the name of the game, and they all get kidnapped one by one and sent to Ghost Island, leaving Pac-Man with the task of saving them and unmasking this mechanical imposter called Talkman. I quite enjoyed this cute little pre-rendered cutscene they have here. Despite the PlayStation's low-resolution graphics, I think it looks good for the time and sets the stage for what's to come next. Also, where else do you get to see Pac-Man screaming his head off like this? Rescuing all the friends is a very integral part of the gameplay, as it is necessary to access the final boss. Ghost Island is the main linear hub world connecting all the different themed areas of the game. There are about 3 levels in between each, with a boss battle right after. And in those levels, you'll be doing what Pac does best: eating ghosts, collecting fruits, dots, letters for bonus stages, keys to save your friends, and Galaxian symbols to activate the mazes, just like the character is commonly known for. All of these items will be especially useful to you during the end-level slot machine, and thankfully, the developers managed to incorporate the original elements of the series into a platformer collectathon type of style that works decently and is unique to Pac-Man. Mind you, I don't necessarily love the mazes in this game, simply for the extra obstacles they added, which frequently got in the way and led to a few cheap deaths here and there. But I still commend the team for trying something different. Now, as for the most important part of any platformer, the controls, Pac-Man can butt bounce to crush enemies, press buttons, and gain extra height for tricky jumps. Rev roll to activate hover plates and blast off of ramps like Sonic the Hedgehog. And finally, he can throw Pac dots as a projectile attack. All of his moves are simple and mostly useful throughout the game. I say mostly because the Pac dot throw is largely useless and will only be needed towards the end. Also, its range is absolutely horrendous, and you have to jump in the air just to maybe land a hit on something. In addition to that, we have the metal ball and super butt bounce power-ups to use. They are functional yet situational at best. I'll say the mechanics are pretty tight for the most part, so can't complain there. However, this game is no stranger to the PS1's archaic pitfalls every now and then, such as wonky hit detection, occasionally slippery physics, and I guess the depth perception caught me off guard a few times, I guess? Most of these issues are prevalent in the boss battles as well, and if I had to sum up all of them in a nutshell, I'd say the first one is okay, the second one is still bullshit because they throw way too many obstacles at you at once, the third one is good because Galaga, the fourth one sucks because of ice physics and camera, the fifth one is slow and tedious, and the sixth and final boss is actually pretty decent, and the only time in the game that requires you to use the Pac dot throw. The boss battles in general feel like the dev team kind of threw everything at the wall to see what would work and test out some mechanics. And if you can get past those issues, Pac-Man World is a fun and charming experience with a rather catchy soundtrack. For an experimental first attempt at a new 3D platformer featuring an arcade game character, it actually turned out alright. You can definitely feel the roughness around the edges, and maybe this title could have baked in the oven for a little while longer, but regardless, what we have here is solid, and lays down the groundwork for future improvements in the sequels. So yeah, I think Namco did good. Now, this is a pretty old game, so it hasn't been ported on anything in a while, but if you still want to experience it, I'm afraid you're gonna have to dust off that old PS1 sitting in the back of your closet, or just play Pac-Man World Re-Pac, a decently faithful remake of the original title. But, anywho, that's gonna do it for this discussion. Have you played Pac-Man World 20th Anniversary for PS1? If so, did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments below. Pac-Man World turned out to be a surprisingly critical success for Namco, despite treading on completely new ground and having a rocky development cycle. But the biggest question is, would they be able to recreate that magic or improve upon what came before in a satisfying way? Well, I happen to think they did, so let's talk about it. About 3 years after the first game on February 26, 2002, Pac-Man burst his way onto the 6th console generation with Pac-Man World 2, a much improved and well-regarded sequel that also turned out to be a complete success. I mean, you don't get that greatest hits label for nothing, you know. Speaking of which, this game released on pretty much everything at the time. PS2, Xbox, GameCube, PC, and even the damn GBA of all things. As you'd expect, it was great to see the franchise fully embrace the 3D space, meaning there are no more 2.5D side-scrolling parts. That's right folks, we got depth now. Well, the first game also had it, but now there's more. Anyway, we open up this new adventure with another good-looking pre-rendered cutscene showing the classic 4 incorrectly named ghosts sneaking around Pac Village while everyone sleeps. They start plucking these magic golden fruits off of a tree for some reason and unknowingly awaken an ancient evil ghost king named Spooky. So now it's up to Pac-Man to recollect all the golden fruits and defeat the ghost once again. And after a little tutorial stage in Pac Village, we dive right into the meat and potatoes of the gameplay, which is similar in structure to the former title. You explore multiple themed areas on a linear map that of course features 3 levels and a boss battle at the end. Wow, that sure sounds familiar. I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it, am I right? But in all seriousness, this game is improved and or changed in certain areas for better or worse. Pac-Man's simple control style returns once again. He can still butt bounce and rev roll as usual, but now that useless Pac-Dot throw is gone and replaced with a flip kick for breaking boxes in the air. The steel ball follows suit and makes you invincible for a few seconds or allows you to sink to the bottom of water. In terms of items, you still collect Pac-Dots, fruits, and tokens, but now letters are gone and so are the keys, because thankfully there are no characters to rescue this time around. In fact, besides the professor and the dog, all the rest of Pac-Man's family is completely gone here. Maybe they went on vacation or something? Also, the special doors leading to switches and Galaxian mazes have been done away with in favor of breaking special crates. And thank fucking goodness the unnecessary obstacles were taken out of the mazes, so they can actually be more fun and less frustrating like they're supposed to be, albeit they are much easier, especially with the Ghost's brain-dead AI. You'll also notice that the levels in general are much wider and open in terms of movement, and the camera allows control while primarily facing Pac-Man's back instead of being completely fixed like before. This is good and bad because, like many other games from this era, the camera tends to fight against you at times, which can lead to a failed jump and a plunge to your doom. It's not a deal breaker by any means, and the platforming is still fun, so I guess I'll go with it. The more expanded level design leads to some interesting and genuinely challenging sections that make good use of their theme. You could be climbing up narrow branches on a tree, ice skating down a treacherous mountain, jumping around on stalagmites directly above lava, or navigating through a creepy, hazard-filled bayou. We don't talk about that ocean level though, because that one really sucks. Now, while there's plenty of variety in the stages themselves, I can't quite say the same about the bosses. Most of them are copy and pasted mechanical ghost fights, which can all be taken down by rev-rolling into them or bouncing on top of their heads. Rinse and repeat. I can tell that aspect of the game was clearly rushed, as only one of the mechs has a level-appropriate design. That being the first boss, Blinky's frog, which should technically be called Clyde's frog because he's the orange one, but whatever. Take that up with Namco, not me. Anyway, my evidence for that is you can see many other ideas that were scrapped from the final version of the game via the Pac Village Museum. It's not that big of a fault though. Now, if I can mention an aspect of Pac-Man World 2 that doesn't fall short at all, it's the frickin' music. I love the soundtrack here even more than the previous game. Each track fits well with their environmental theme and carries the tone you expect for its difficulty. So credit where it's due. They did a great job. And if you want to listen to the music outside of the stages, you can by going to the jukebox in Sue's Arcade, as well as play other classic Pac-Man games. Pretty damn cool feature that I'm glad they added. So even now, after all these years, Pac-Man World 2 still remains my favorite game in this trilogy and is arguably the best to play through. Trust me, it's far from flawless, but the things that were improved upon went a long way to making this a tighter and more polished experience as a whole. I always enjoy returning to this game every few years or so just to see if the nostalgia high will wear off. Thankfully, the game is more accessible than the previous, being multi-platform and getting re-release combo packs every now and then. So if you're new to this game and want to give it a try, what the hell are you waiting for? Anyway, that's going to conclude this analysis. Let me know what you thought of Pac-Man World 2 and share your experience with the game in the comment section down below. Third time's the charm, as they say. Namco decided to give the Pac-Man World series one last hurrah in 2005, and it just so happened to fall on the character's 25th birthday. So, you're probably thinking they've got something real special cooked up for this last outing, right? Well, yeah, it was definitely special, I'll say. Ironically, this game also had a troubled development process just like its elder sibling, and originally started out as something completely different, with art direction and concepts being spearheaded by Don frickin' Bluth of all people. But to no surprise, the ambitious project was scrapped and reworked into what we currently know as Pac-Man World 3, developed by not Namco studio Blitz Games. From my own personal experience over the years, World 3 is certainly my least favorite and the most infamous title in the series thus far. So let's take a deeper look at it to see why exactly that is. Despite being developed by a totally different studio than the first two games, Pac-Man World 3 feels kinda like how you'd expect, but something is clearly off. And nothing encapsulates that feeling quicker than this empty and uninspired start screen. What happened to the music and punchy energy from before? Now we just got clouds. How exciting. This new adventure dropped on November 15th, 2005 for pretty much everything, as well as the PSP and Nintendo DS, and was also intended to celebrate Pac's 25th birthday, which is verbally addressed in the game's story.
Well, you only turned 25 once.
Oh yeah, and speaking of which, the most shocking new addition to the World franchise is that now our main character and everybody else can finally talk. Wow! Now, I will admit, on paper this idea sounds concerning given the type of character we're dealing with here, even though it's also not the first time he's ever talked in media before, but surprisingly enough, they actually pulled it off. In fact, I'd even say the voice acting and dialogue was pretty good and got a chuckle out of me every once in a while. It feels like they put more effort into that than everything else. Now, the story of Pac-Man World 3 begins in a similar fashion to World 1, where Pac-Man arrives home to celebrate his birthday with family, but this time he gets snatched up and sent away to another dimension before he can even blow out the candles.
Oh well, at least this birthday's still better than my 20th.
The lie detector determined that was a lie.
He suddenly arrives in this new location called the Spectral Realm and is greeted by the old villain from World 1 who is apparently an ally now. And he's not the only ghost joining the crew. In this game, there is a greater threat to the universe that calls for Pac-Man and the ghosts of his past like Pinky and Blinky to team up together to fight him. And this so-called greater threat is a pint-sized, annoying megalomaniac twerp named Irwin, and he is not actually threatening or memorable in the slightest. Actually, he's the worst villain out of the whole trilogy. Same thing goes for his lackey, whose name I forgot and don't care about. Now, that briefly sums up the story, but what is there to say about the gameplay itself? Well, for starters, it is still a platformer at heart that takes a much greater focus on minute-to-minute beat-em-up situations with returning mazes and puzzle elements. But unfortunately, everything feels worse here somehow. Pac-Man can still jump, rev roll, and butt bounce as per usual, and the influence of combat mechanics can be felt immediately. Now he can punch with this lackluster 3-hit combo as a primary attack, in conjunction with new power pellet abilities for dealing with waves of enemies, which will be very often. All of his base moves have been regressed in some way, like having your jump height slightly shortened, your butt bounce limited to only 3 hits in a row with a shockwave at the end, and finally not being able to stop on a dime during the rev roll. They still serve their initial purposes, but not quite as good as before. The level progression has also been simplified even further, as now there is no hub world or map screen. You just instantly blip to the next level after a cutscene, making things much more streamlined, which is not inherently bad, but just screams of laziness. I'm not sure if it's still remnants of the original project shining through, but I'm not really a fan of the whole apocalyptic aesthetic and colors of this game. It just makes for a dour, bland, and empty feel that doesn't remind me of Pac-Man World at all. And the quiet, ambient soundtrack leaves much to be desired too. Mind you, I'm not against there being a new setting for this story, I just wish it was more appealing to look at, that's all. The levels are much bigger than ever before while still being linear and designed around puzzle platforming challenges involving spinning switch pads, wall jumping, running on disappearing floors, pack dot chains, occasionally playing as both Pinky and Blinky, destroying energy siphons, and pole sliding. Also, how can I forget about the absolute worst new addition to the gameplay, the spectral ghost sections. Good lord, these parts were annoying, and they went on for way too long. They showed up so frequently that it felt like padding for runtime. I'd say the combat in general was also a frustrating slog most of the time. Doing the same repetitive combo and bounce over and over and over again damn near wore me out. The new power pellet abilities make it slightly more bearable, but not by much. And don't even get me started with those fucking metal scorpions. They were so irritating to fight. There's even a part halfway through the story where you pilot a giant mech suit Talkman to fight off hordes of monsters, and it sucks too. What a surprise. All of that is capped off by 2 boring as hell boss fights against Irwin that play exactly the same. Boring! Now, the collectibles you gather in this game are mostly untouched, but somehow feel less important than previously. You still have fruits, dots of course, Galaxians, and these new 25th anniversary silver statues and trading cards. Most of your spoils can be viewed outside the story with the museum feature, as well as replay mazes and watch behind the scenes footage. But despite all of that, unfortunately, with everything this title has to offer, it still did not leave a great impression on me, whether it be today or 2 decades ago at first launch. So I guess I can definitively say that Pac-Man World 3 just missed the mark, I'm afraid. The reliable formula that worked well enough in 1 and 2 kind of fell through the floor this time around. Like I said, the only saving grace for me was the character interactions and witty dialogue, but that wasn't quite enough to save the monotonous gameplay. And I'm sure there are some people out there who do enjoy this game for what it is, which is okay. Also, I don't solely blame the development team for how this finale turned out. Keep in mind, it wasn't even supposed to be a world game in the first place, and Blitz had to work with the scraps left behind by Namco's mismanagement. So take that as you will. I played through this game again recently to prepare for this review, and that will probably be the last time. I'm certain this title could be redeemed with a Re-Pac style remaster, but I highly doubt Namco will even try to touch this game again anytime soon. But who knows what the future holds. So with all that said, how do you feel about Pac-Man World 3? There's quite a bit to say about it, that's for sure. If you enjoyed it or hated it, feel free to discuss in the comments. And don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel so the YouTube algorithm will treat me good.
What's for dinner?
You are.
You heard the lady. I believe now's the part where you run.
Damn, this is the thanks they get for helping you save the world? I guess some things never change, huh? What happens when you take an established platformer trilogy and turn it into a racing game? You get Pac-Man World Rally, that's what. It seems like Namco took a page from Naughty Dog's book and decided to grant their titular character a chance to burn rubber on the racetrack. And given how popular the kart racing genre is, it was only inevitable that Pac-Man would get his chance to take the wheel. Being that this is the last official world game that came out in the PS2 era, it looks alright from an outside perspective. But keep in mind, a recognizable IP with a side of graphical flash and dash does not make for instant success. So, most importantly, is this game actually good? Well, let's take a look under the hood and find out. First off, that title screen music is a freaking banger! This title dropped in 2006 and was developed by Smart Bomb Interactive. After the misfire that was World 3, the safest possible way to end the franchise on a good note would be a Mario Kart style racing clone. It features all the usual hallmarks of these types of games without reinventing the wheel, no pun intended. Elements of Pac-Man's typical game mechanics shine through and work well for what they need to be. You can still collect Pac dots, and they serve as energy to fill up your Pac meter. After you've collected enough, you activate this giant, invincible, hungry Pac-Man thing and mow down your enemies who have all been turned into blue ghosts, just like if you had eaten a power pellet. Picking up the fruits opens special corresponding doors leading to shortcuts. And drifting or power sliding is also present in this game, and it functions as a temporary speed boost, rewarding you for good timing. And the last key gameplay feature is obviously the race items. You've got the standard red, green, and blue turtle shell type projectiles that can be fired in front or behind you. I'm not sure what the heck these things are, but they do be running. Also, your own attack can bounce off the walls and end up hitting you instead, so that's just nice. Real nice. There's about 4 standard modes of play: circuit mode, quick race, time trial mode, and the Jack X style battle mode. I guess you could say the circuit is the closest thing to a story mode in this game, simply for the fact that when you complete all the different cups, the end credits suddenly start rolling, so yeah. We've got the cherry, grape, watermelon, and classic cup that all require you to gain the most points by the end of 3 to 4 races and win the trophy. They include a variety of tracks with locations that kinda fit in with Pac-Man's World themes, and they pop with color and little background details that make them pleasing to look at. You won't find anything too mind-blowing aesthetic-wise, but it's serviceable. They even have a track based on the Katamari game, and this really cool arcade machine table being played by Pac-Man and the Misses. On that note, there's a decent roster of playable characters in the game, and all of them offer just a teensy-weensy bit of depth as they all have different stats and weight classes that affect how your vehicle controls. I love how they included the main villains from the trilogy and even some guest characters. Oh look, and they finally got the ghost names correct this time around. I'm not sure how that oversight went on for so long, but whatever. They each play somewhat different, like Spooky being heavier, slower, and harder to drift, or Pac-Man Jr. being lighter and floatier, making him careen off the edge every once in a while. Believe it or not, who you pick in this game actually does matter in the long run, or I guess if you're just really good at the game, you can make it work with anybody. And finally, like I said before, the music and overall sound design is pretty good here, can't complain. So, to sum up my overall thoughts nice and neatly, I think Pac-Man World Rally is an actually fun and decently put together little kart racer. For the last official swan song of the Pac-Man World series, it serves its purpose well enough, and I consider it to be somewhere in the B or high C tier in that particular genre. It's faithful to its source material and characters while trying to do its own little thing. I've definitely played far better racers in my day, but I can assure this one won't steer you away either. Now, if you have played this game already, what do you think of Pac-Man World Rally? It's been over 20 years since the original Pac-Man World released on the PlayStation, and while it was a decent start to a rather successful franchise, there were definitely some elements that could have been better. And apparently Namco Bandai felt the same way. So in a rather surprising twist of fate, they decided to breathe new life into this old classic with a full-blown top-to-bottom HD remake in August of 2022. I guess you could say Namco was inspired by other platforming mascots making their grand return to the public eye, and what better way to set the stage for potential new games than to reintroduce the series to a fresh audience. But having said that, let's see if this title can actually surpass the OG and stand on its own 2 feet. So, without constantly repeating myself and making this video sound redundant, I want to start off by saying that you can definitely feel the effort Namco put in to recreate this game to the best of their ability. There are much comparisons to be made and new added details / changes that need to be addressed. This is the first true next-gen World game, so as you can imagine, it looks beautiful. The game was developed by Now Production, who already has a decent history with the yellow fella, dropping on all current consoles like PS4, PS5, Switch, Xbox Series X, and Windows PC. Just about everything has been tweaked in some way down to the music, gameplay, and cutscenes. We open up this adventure in a similar way to before, but now they remixed it by having the 4 standard ghosts kidnap everybody instead of random enemies. The party takes place outside instead of in the house, and the house itself got a redesign along with some of the characters. And don't worry, I'll talk more about that later. And also, the cutscene is made in engine and not pre-rendered like I'd hoped, but it's alright. Now, I will say the absence of normal voice acting is a little disappointing. This time everybody speaks in gibberish and there's subtitles to tell you what they're saying. It's a shame cause I'm gonna miss Talkman's robotic voice and Pac-Man's iconic scream. Like I said, it's not that big of a deal, just personal preference. But you know what is a big deal? Miss Pac-Man. Oh wait, my bad, I meant to say Pac-Mom. You see, she is one of a few characters that have new names and designs for this game. For those of you who don't already know or care, Namco has been tangled in a long-running legal battle with a company called @Games over the copyrights ownership for Miss Pac-Man and other elements related to her. So in recent years, they have retroactively scrubbed the character from old and new releases in a way to stop them from collecting money via royalties. As unfortunate as the situation is, it's just business at the end of the day. The redesigns for the most part are not that bad, but the lack of regular pie eyes, a nose, and these skinnier stick arms and legs just don't quite sit right with me. Maybe I'll get used to it eventually. Maybe. But anywho, enough of that. Let's continue on to the most important part of this remake, the gameplay. While there have obviously been some changes in different areas for better, Namco remade this game in the safest possible way imaginable. Everything you expect from the original game in terms of moves, collectibles, levels, mazes, bosses are all here and accounted for with a fresh shiny coat of paint. The hub world has been expanded to a much larger size with features from the start screen being available here instead. It also includes fast travel to other areas and helpful little tidbits like showing what items you have and have not collected yet. The levels themselves are pretty much the same structure-wise. Like I said, Namco wanted to keep things safe, so the biggest change is the graphical fidelity and extra detail on background set dressing. Pac-Man's overall moveset comes back in full, but does feel noticeably different in the control department. I wouldn't exactly say it feels better than before, but it functions alright. The only new thing worth mentioning is the giant Pac-Man you can transform into for chomping up ghosts. All enemies and obstacles operate about the same too, and unfortunately there are no new secret areas to explore. I mean, they still couldn't even be bothered to add the unused kooky crypt level from the mines area, so it's still strangely the only area with 2 levels and a boss instead of 3, which is quite disappointing to be honest, but I had a feeling that's what they were going to do. Now the boss battles are where this remake really shines. Pretty much all the frustrating issues I had with the mechanics have been buffed out this time. Each battle feels more epic and cinematic with these little intro cutscenes they added where Talkman flies in to power them up, making his and their presence feel more important in the grand scheme of things. The first boss adds an extra phase that keeps Windbag from being a complete pushover. The second and most infamous boss in the game is much more fair and tolerable, thank fucking goodness. The third boss is mostly unchanged but still better to control overall. The fourth boss surprisingly controls a lot better too, even though I was initially worried about this close camera perspective they chose. The fifth boss is actually kind of fun and challenging this time and makes the Pac-Dot throw useful for once. And the final boss is trickier and more dramatic tone-wise, although I don't like how long you have to wait to hit him. But regardless, they were all solid improvements. 2 thumbs up. Now, the last prominent feature that I want to mention is that, of course, the music is still good and actually better than ever before. They have all been given a modern twist to enhance their sound in a more fitting way to current games. To be honest, some tracks I could barely even tell the difference between the new and old, but the improvements can be heard nonetheless. Here are a few of my favorite tracks that were done the most justice. Alright, so with everything this remake brings to the table in comparison to its PS1 counterpart, it passed the assignment with flying colors. I can proudly say that Pac-Man World Re-Pac is a decent and faithful return to the character's 3D platforming origins. Bringing this old classic back to the current day for new and old fans to enjoy was a great idea on Namco's part. Mind you, it doesn't exactly innovate in a huge way or shake up the industry or genre, but it delivers on its expectations and is easy enough for anybody to pick up and play. I sure hope Namco listens to audience feedback and considers remaking the others at some point, or at the very least make a brand new adventure a la Pac-Man World 4. I consider Re-Pac to be the definitive way to play the game now, as most if not all of my previous complaints with the mechanics have been addressed. So for now, I believe that more good things could potentially be on the way. We'll just have to wait and see. Have you played Pac-Man World Re-Pac? If so, share your thoughts on it down below in the comments as per usual, and don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more content such as this. Thanks for tuning in to Anubis Black, and I'll catch you next time.